Yes, there's definitely like ancient roots there, whereas here, this place, America, is kind of, it's a project. It's like a science project, is how I would describe it.
Can you go into that? I think that's so interesting. The science project.
Well, what I mean by that is like if you look at the occult development of America, like its origins
Hmm.
beyond just politics, right? So you have your politicians like George Washington and so forth, and we all know them from the history books, but they had allegiances to secret societies, Masonry, Templars, and those came from, uh, their headmasters in England, in the Vatican, and they were sent here and they used that process of Masonry kind of to develop the American culture. And it was literally kind of artificially created from the beginning, in my opinion. That's why I kind of call it a science project.
Artificially, would you go as deep as some theories out there about the whole reptilian, amphibian, genetic bloodline, or are we still staying very much on Earth? And
Well, I'm not discounting any of that. That's kind of, that'll be a really, what's the word? That'll be kind of a tangent, because if I would say, when you look at the like any bloodline of kings, whether it be now or in the past, so it's all in common, in my opinion. They're all related, and yeah, I think there's an element that is not human within that. Let's put it that way. It's from, there were different names for it depending on, if you looked at like different cultures, but they all spoke of the beings that came from the other side, and they created this hybrid race of people, and then this hybrid race started to rule over mankind. And I think those bloodlines are still essentially in power. They just kind of, they look human, but I think they know their genealogy very well, and they have done a very good job at making us common people of whatever ethnicity or race, we've forgotten ours. And so they have a distinct advantage over us now. You know what I mean?
so, do you think that was the secret weapon?
The destruction of identity.
Yes.
Is that what you're? Yes, I think yeah, it's definitely a sort of a secret weapon, because people, when you destroy someone's history, all of a sudden they no longer remember you're their enemy. So it's like it is the perfect weapon, because you don't really have to do anything. They kind of, they forget you're even their enemy. You can just abuse them.
What do you think the agenda or the agendas, is it feeding off energy? Is it is it exploiting Earth for gold resources and things like that? Like, what do you think? What do you think the essential agenda is?
Well, I tend to believe like Hebrew prophecy and what I understand from Hebrew prophecy. Um, so you look at that, and you kind of put that together, and you see how, you have this mastermind being that you could call him Satan, or, he has many names, as they say, right? I think that's the eye on top of the pyramid, so to speak. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And I think, he's essentially waging a war for the souls of men, and he wants to drag as many of us to the underworld, that is spoken of, as he can before his time is up.
Do you believe that we have shifted in the last, some people say maybe since the so-called apocalypse, the unveiling of 2012, planetary shifts, currents, vibratory, energetic, waves going up. Do you think that we are waking up, or are we being even more dumbed down?
I think definitely that people, I mean, they're starting to separate from like the status quo media, apparatus a little bit, and they're starting to learn critical thinking to some degree, because I feel like we've been so heavily beaten over the head with public school and work and these sort of things that most people, they no longer have critical thinking. And people will just tell them things, authorities will tell them things, government, religious, and they'll believe it. And I think there are people now, with the advent of the internet and just the freedom that comes with that, people who really are looking for truth, they're learning how to put things together. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense, and you make perfect sense, and everything you say is mind-blowing. But yeah, it's like humanity has been sedated, for however long, thousands of years or hundreds, or how long do you think it's been going on? Do you think it traces back to ancient civilizations, Egypt, or is it further, like these monarchy bloodlines?
Mm-hmm.
How long do you think it's been going on?
Okay, well, I'll tell you what I believe. I believe that when you look at, let's say, the generally accepted view of what the oldest records are, which would be Mesopotamia, right?
Yes.
I believe you can go beyond that, and there was a flood before that, and that there are records that go beyond the flood, like the Book of Enoch, and also parts of the Bible, or the Hebrew records, as I prefer to call them. And you can read within these books that basically before, are you familiar with Cain?
Absolutely.
Before Cain, it says this in the book of Josephus, all right? In fact, I can get you the exact quote. So let me just do that for you, so I don't, butcher it.
Perfect.
Yeah.
People maybe that don't know, Josephus was a historian. Am I being correct? A historian during the time of Christ, or?
That's good. Exactly. Yes. Josephus was himself a Hebrew, so when he speaks on matters of Hebrew history, what you could call Bible history, ancient history, he has a lot of authority, and he was viewed by all the ancient as a source of precise information. So, for me anyway, when he says something has a lot of weight, so I did find it here. So would you like me to read that?
Please.
Okay, so when you go into the book of Josephus, there's a book called Antiquities of the Jews. It's called, and it's book 1, chapter 2. That's where this is from, if you want to look it up or whatever. And it says, just the background with Cain, right, was he was cursed basically in one way or another, where he could no longer really provide for himself through agriculture, right? So this is what ended up happening. And when Cain had traveled over many countries, he with his wife built a city named Nod, which was a place so called, and there he settled with his children. However, he did not accept his punishment in order to amendment, but to increase his wickedness. For he only aimed to procure everything that was for his own bodily pleasure, though it obliged him to be injurious to his neighbors. He augmented his household substance with much wealth by rapine and violence. He excited his acquaintance to procure pleasure and spoils by robbery. He became a great leader of men into wicked courses. He also, and this is the key point right here, he also introduced a change in that way of simplicity wherein men lived before, and was the author of measures and weights. In other words, artificial economies. That's the way I read this, right? Because he built a city, and then he used that city to put himself as a leader on top of it, and then that city changed the way people had lived in the past, where it says, they used to live in simplicity, they used to live off the land, they used to be self-sufficient, people weren't totally dependent slaves at that point. But when Cain came into the picture, he built his city, and he built this economic quote-unquote debt system, or whatever he did to enslave people. He changed things. And whereas they lived innocently, I'm continuing, it says, and whereas they lived innocently and generously while they knew nothing of such arts, he changed the world into cunning craftiness. So yeah.
No, that's wow.